feliz 2024. Tami, ¿cómo estás? ¿Cómo te recibió ese año?
Yo súper bien, súper contenta de estar por acá de vuelta con todos ustedes y además muy feliz porque estamos celebrando. Surfing República cumple 10 años de estar al aire en televisión nacional.
Este 2024 cumplimos 10 años, así que quédense cerquita porque viene una gran celebración. ¿Y qué les parece, Tami, si empezamos con lo que viene este episodio de esta semana?
Así es, y bueno, como recién está arrancando el año, no ha habido mucha acción en lo que es el surfing a nivel mundial, pero les traemos un video de los mejores Swells del 2023.
We always remember the good days, but what makes a whole year really memorable?
Surf forecasting is an art as much as a science. The best forecasters, in my opinion, are those that have a lot of experience and use all of those tools available to nudge them in a correct direction.
Maybe it's simple. In a good year, the whole world pumps. And it always starts somewhere. Eastern Pacific Ocean, January 6th. The wildest storm in decades flares directly off the California coast.
The swell was that first week of January, but we could see a pattern shift was likely a week or so before Christmas is when we started thinking like, okay, things are going to probably blow up here.
Saw a couple of model runs. We're showing 20 at 18. When it first started to come up, we started to kind of have a chuckle about it in our internal communications. And then as the storm started to develop and seeing it take shape, it was really clear that this was going to be a special event.
Go out on a limb. Give us a wave size.
I would think Todos was probably 40 to 60 foot faces.
Oh wow.
The Harvest Buoy is just offshore Point Conception in the northwest portion of Southern California. It's a great tool for indicating incoming swells into Southern California, and it ended up hitting almost 27 feet, which for a direction 290 degrees or less, for that more westerly swell direction, is the biggest reading we've seen there at the Harvest Buoy.
This thing is the first sign that 2023 will be no ordinary year.
With the Wild West event, it was wild. It was unruly.
This is what I'm coming over.
There's some unfortunate damage in places like Santa Cruz, right? Where you had this massive swell hitting the coast, big high tides, some crazy damage. You had some waves going in places they're not supposed to be.
The wind with Wild West was dynamic because that storm was right offshore, so it was really helpful to be able to look at wind conditions in real time.
So heading into Friday, just incredible size still showing on our nearshore buoy network. You wake up in the morning, you check the live winds, and the wind was offshore. Just like light offshore flow really allows a lot of places that weren't in play at all on Thursday to really come into play.
When you use a combination of wind stations to know what the wind's doing up and down the coast, you use the buoys to know kind of what the swell's doing, and then ideally you cross-reference that with our cameras, you've got a really good idea of what's happening and where the best surf might be.
There's always expectations around the Hawaiian surf season, especially in January. But nobody expected January 22nd.
For me personally, the most exciting, most rewarding, most stressful, all of the above was the eddy.
So the storm that produced the eddy swell, yeah, it was big, it was massive, strong, it had all the qualities you want to see to produce such a swell of this magnitude. The best part of it is that all this was aimed directly at Hawaii.
There's so much anticipation with these events. They only run every few years, really, and so there's all this buildup and anticipation, and it's such a special event for competitors that you don't want to get it wrong. The historical forecasts are certainly one of the top tools that I used, and we use a lot. It's a great reminder of how past events performed, compare the storm, and then the swell model output. And these are the types of numbers you want to see, at least for an eddy swell. Yeah, this is on.
Even the world's best big wave riders were skeptical of this one. but the buoys told the story before the Waimea lineup could.
Most, if not all, publicly available swell models really undercalled this forecast, especially when you're looking at it about a week out, because these different models, whether it's Lotus, whether it's Wave Watch 3, were undercalling the swell. I think it caught a lot of people off guard.
There it is! There it started! Yeah,
30 foot solid, maybe 50 on the big one. Huge day. Yeah, super stoked to make part of it.
You're always stoked to get a forecast right, especially at that magnitude, and you just watch it all day, and you watch all the performances the men and women put on out there, and just to see the bay be that consistent, that big, and that perfect all day. The best day of surf I've ever seen at Waimea. Certainly, I think a very strong argument can be made it was the best eddy that's ever run, maybe 2016 in the running too, but as big as the bay can hold and as clean and as good as it can hold too. So everything just lined up for a perfect day.
If there was one swell that changed people's lives in 2023, this had to be the one. But the Pacific is a huge ocean with many faces. Far to the southwest, her surface waters are warmer than they should be. A tropical cyclone builds over those waters.
So we're mid-cyclone season, February in Australia, right? We're seeing this cyclone forming in the tropical region of the Coral Sea. 5th of February, it was declared a Category 1 cyclone and moved westwards towards the Australian coast with the trade wind flow. And that's pretty typical with these systems. Now, the swell from this system, it came in two lots. We saw one longer period northeast swell that peaked through Friday the 10th, lit up Noosa particularly and the Gold Coast points. And then as it moved south, it kind of slowed a little bit and it didn't quite behave as forecast. And that happens with tropical cyclones, that happens all the time. We saw it really start to kick through Sunday. We could see this rapid rise in the energy through there. It was starting to get bigger and bigger through the day, and the period increased as well as we saw the proper east swell from the tropical to ex-tropical system.
It's a magical moment at the end of an amazing run of surf for this coast. But you can't trust a tropical cyclone. Of all the world's great swell givers, they're the most erratic.
So we saw Gabrielle form up in the tropics there, and at this point when it starts coming south, it starts going severe Category 3, moves across Norfolk Island as a subtropical, extratropical storm, and then smashes into New Zealand's North Island.
Gabrielle turns toward New Zealand, and while Australia pumps, New Zealand drowns.
Wow, this is the road to the beach. No go. Local only day.
The seasons are shifting. 2,000 nautical miles east of New Zealand, another Pacific island chain is preparing for the swell of the year.
South Pac season got off to a little bit of a slow start in 23, and then as we moved through the end of April and towards the beginning of May, we started to see something really start to develop on the charts near New Zealand. Well, it was going to be a good southwest swell for Tahiti. What really stood out was just the track that this storm took. It really hugged right up near New Zealand and pushed towards Tahiti.
Chopu is a quiet riverside village until the big southwest swells begin to arrive in mid-year. Then she draws the whole surfing world's eyes.
Sure, there's been bigger swells that charged Tahiti through the years, even much bigger. But this swell had some other elements about it that made it so special. For size, it was right at that threshold of being big enough for some tow bombs out there, especially on Sunday morning, but small enough to still be able to paddle into. The swell direction was right in a sweet spot from the south-southwest, around 215, 190 degrees. So it had enough west in it to keep the barrels nice, wide, and open. enough south in it that it ran down the reef longer. And with that southerly direction too, allowed entry into the wave to be able to paddle into it a little bit easier.
But more than anything, the conditions were just unbelievable. The wind being so light all day, it's really something that's hard to come by when you're in the trade wind belt. And to get a full day where it's just glassy all day and it lines up with the peak of a swell event is pretty tremendous.
It's an incredible day. Yet, like Tropical Cyclone Gabrielle, it's followed by disaster. Overnight, a flood sweeps through the village. Nature gives, then she takes. The Northern Hemisphere summer is long and hot. All the talk is of El Nino on our doorstep. It's not supposed to be a great year for hurricanes, but nobody told Franklin.
Hurricane Franklin was the first major hurricane of the 2023 season. And initially it didn't look like much. It was a sheared, weak tropical storm in the Caribbean Sea. Eventually it crossed over the Dominican Republic, kind of meandered north of Puerto Rico there, still was a pretty weak system before finally getting its act together. And once it did, and it did it very quickly. It rapidly intensified into a Category 4 hurricane. And it provided days of waves for the Caribbean, the East Coast, and Canada, and eventually over into the parts of the Eastern Atlantic as well. The slow movement of the storm, the rapid intensification, it peaking as a Category 4 hurricane, all great things for swell production. And many people scored a lot of great waves from Franklin. As a forecaster, pretty much all of it's interesting, really. The dynamics of a hurricane are fascinating, but then as a part of that, you have to translate that to the actual surf. So Swell Spectra is one of the new things that we've added on Surfline. Pretty cool tool. What's interesting is, on Monday and into Tuesday, we kind of had this mid-period east-southeast swell. Makes sense. Franklin was a pretty weak tropical system at that point, so it's sending kind of some mid-period swell up to us. But as the system rapidly intensified, we can see the longer period energy that started to show on Tuesday and into Wednesday. What this means for me is, is that shorter period energy is typically going to be a little bit peakier with our beach breaks. As you get the swell periods up into the 13, 14 second range, you start worrying about closeouts, and you really got to find kind of those distinct pieces of sand. The standout was probably the Outer Banks. We had days of light winds or favorable winds, days of waves from Franklin. Variety of swell periods too, which kind of turned on some spots as opposed to others through the duration of the swell. But the Outer Banks really probably, was really the standout.
The storm, once known as Franklin, turns toward Europe. Surfers across oceans are connected by this storm. It's a special moment in 2023.
Here on the east side of the Atlantic, we seemed to skip summer. We had kind of like a perpetual autumn. We had waves, but there was lots of wind. Just as September started, Franklin's swell kind of appeared on the horizon. The weather flipped. It wasn't like a huge swell. It went up to like 3 foot 16 seconds, which is say not big, but with the light wind conditions, it was such a welcome relief from the onslaught of onshore wind that we had all summer. I think west of Ireland copped the biggest swell, but yeah, into Cornwall, Wales, further south into France, all had some really good waves.
Meanwhile, in the Southern Ocean, just southwest of Africa, massive energies gather.
This was quite an unusual storm, shall we say. It's been a slow season through this winter season, then all of a sudden, mid-September, a monster comes out of the South Atlantic, straight up underneath the Cape and just blows up, sending significant south-southwest swell up the coast and into Jeffreys Bay.
If you get a swell of this size, as anyone that's surfed a point break knows, a lot of times that means the waves will swing super wide, or there'll be a ton of water moving around, or all these other variables that make it kind of not the the idyllic wave that we kind of picture in our heads. And that was the case.
At first, it pumps. Then this great surf zone is overwhelmed.
This is kind of just one big gut punch of swell. You can see the impacts of that, not only from maxed out J Bay, but from the coastal impacts that we've discussed.
The wave energy chart here, we can see when that swell started peaking into Jeffreys Bay. And like I said, there's numbers in the to the fives, almost 6,000's worth of energy there. And we can see the peak swell heights at 31 feet, 19 seconds. Absolutely enormous for that part of coastline.
We live on a water planet, connected not by land but by oceans. Understanding those oceans and how swells and winds move across them is a lifetime's work.
If you were a surfer, there's a pretty good chance you scored some waves in 2023. And scoring isn't getting the biggest, gnarliest waves ever. Like, for some people it is. For other people, it's finding the perfect 2-foot clean peeling longboard day. Using those tools available on Surfline will help you determine when you're going to get that.
We're stoked to have seen and ridden the swells of 2023. In the coming year, we hope to help you find the wave of your life. Have a great 2024, everyone, and know before you go.
There's a right time for everything. A right time to learn. A right time to try. A right time to fall. There's a right time to find your wave. And there's a right place to enjoy your passion like nowhere else.
Esto es Surfing República y como saben, diciembre, enero y febrero es la temporada de olas de la tierra de la Loja.
Por eso nos vamos para el North Shore de la isla hawaiana, Oahu, para ver lo mejor del Vans Pipe Masters, donde se coronó John Florence y Moana Jones.
I'm just stoked to be out here and be able to get some waves, you know, like being out there with 3 people is, I know everyone says it a lot, but it's pretty insane, especially here. The waves actually turned on in our heat and the boys got some fun ones, so just stoked to get a couple.
It just looked like an underground one. None of the girls kind of paddled for it, and I didn't want to move too quick so that they couldn't see it. I don't know, it just looked like it had a nice kind of line and it was drawing a little bit, so I just had to do like get underneath it and take a couple pumps, which I never really get to do, so it's really nice to kind of ride a barrel and it be a bit longer than what I'm used to, and hence the claim. It was fun, the waves are really fun. Pipeline's my favorite place in the world, and I mean, after every time I catch a good wave out there, I just involuntarily start crying for some reason. I just love this wave so much.
Who's your pick to win the women's final?
Moana Jones. She's still the queen of pipeline to me, that's for sure. But all the girls that are in the final are really good. And look at that girl, Erin Brooks. Oh my gosh, she's only 16. And they're taking the hits. Let's see who's the best one in pipe.
surfing in this event. It's insane. I just want to have fun. I'm so like just frothed out Grom right now. I don't even know what to say.
Come on, Annie. Come on, Annie.
Right.
These moments, just to be able to surf in the Pipe Masters, is it's a dream, you know. I was a kid going to school across the street here, and now I'm surfing to be able to put on a show in front of thousands of people, have my wife, my kids here. Like, I'm just living the dream, bro.
He's going. McConnell jumping in. Way to chip in. McConnell pan. Again. Oh, yeah!
It just chipped you in so perfectly, but it stretched out heaps, and then foam ball popped up. I couldn't even see anything from inside it. I was just like, the back of my board lifted up, and I just kept kind of moving through the tube and then came out, and I was like, wow. Wave, one of the waves of my life, maybe the wave of my life.
For John Flores, and he's going to come. Yeah, dude! Do the same!
All time, John. They're just winning the Pipe Masters at any point in time is a huge goal in my life. I've grown up here, watched all my favorite surfers win out here, and it was a really fun final too. There's a lot of my friends, Seth, Billy, McConnell. Like, I wasn't expecting it. I was just kind of having fun surfing with my brothers in heats, and I was in final, and yeah, now I won. I'm stoked.
Number 0 on the board.
I wasn't worried that I cried a lot.
Moana, Jones, Wong.
Y bueno amigos, lastimosamente ha llegado el momento de despedirnos, agradecerles como siempre por acompañarnos en este primer programa del año 2024 y a Jacobo como siempre por el espacio de grabación.
Esperamos que lo hayan disfrutado muchísimo y nos vemos en un próximo episodio. ¡Chao!